This is the closest to how the last weeks of March felt like, explores writer and director Kunga Trofell's relationship with his father and the financial challenges COVID-19 created, which threaten the livelihood of many, especially immigrant families like his. This documentary begins in Chappelle's college bedroom, where he gets ready for the day in complete silence before a recorded conversation plays abruptly, speaking in their native language. The father and son are discussing the ongoing situation and their safety as COVID is taking over. As the audio tells one story, the visuals tell another. The lonesome life that Chappelle is living at his college compared to the joyful story he tells his father. The audience hears Chappelle lie to his father, stating the food is good and tasty as they see him spitting it out onto the floor. Lying becomes a recurring theme in this documentary, as in the climax of the story, Chappelle lies to his father about his broken skateboard needing replacement. This forces his father to admit their financial situation, as he confesses he only has $180 in his bank account. Chappelle appears small in this grand wide shot, emphasizing his young age and evokes a sense of pity towards the boy. The resolution comes as the son says we shouldn't lie to each other, which allows them to make a promise together. The father will share news with his son, no matter good or bad, while the son must continue his studies and not allow any bad news to hurt his ambitions. The last weeks of March portrays a very personal experience of COVID through familiar relationships that the audiences can connect with, as they too had to manage the impacts of COVID on their lives and families. Last Weeks of March is primarily a participatory documentary, with the filmmaker becoming a subject himself, and the interaction/relationship between the filmmaker and the other subject is heavily emphasized. The audience follows the filmmaker's day, however, not quite in a first-person view. In fact, this documentary heavily utilizes mid to wide shots to incorporate as much visual information as possible. This is exemplified in the final scene of the film, which is more than half of the documentary's total duration. While the visuals and audio are reenactments, they do not feel staged and lead towards a sense of story, as Chappelle uses natural lighting and conversations to drive the documentary, which is very typical of the participatory mode. But the purposeful construction with mise-en-scene, in combination with the non-diegetic sound, adopts poetic documentary practices, which strays from the common participatory interview structure. Chappelle chooses to rely on reenactment to convey this story, basing the phone calls on real conversations the father and son had. Chappelle writes, acting through the script with my father and reliving those hard conversations again with him helped us to regain some sense of control over a situation we were losing control over. This stylistic choice combats the ethical concern of ambush interviews and allows the two to say exactly what they desire rather than capitalizing on the shock of surprise. The documentary does not incorporate background music and rarely any sound effects, simply accompanying the visuals with the non-diegetic sounds of the phone call. Diegetic sound is only utilized after the introductory segment, where the secondary subject, the father, is featured for the first time, and at the end with the transition to the credits. Choosing only these moments for diegetic sound and foregoing a backing track emphasizes the importance of these scenes, drawing the audience's attention back to the visuals rather than the story told by the non-diegetic phone call. This choice of visual and auditory expression explores the loneliness and isolation of the filmmaker, specifically the physical and emotional distance he feels from his father as a result of the lies and the constrictions of COVID. Chappelle shapes this documentary about COVID-19 by intertwining his personal values into the story and expression. As an immigrant from India living in America, his relationship with his family relies heavily on digital communication, which is heavily adapted into the storytelling strategy for this documentary. The struggle between family members is shown as the father and son attempt to reconcile their differences, the son's need for honesty, and the father's wish to protect him from the truth. Chappelle cleverly manipulates the participatory mode to create a unique documentary that articulates his experiences and emotions as he and his family adapted to the new circumstances posed by COVID-19. The casual, familial conversations between the father and son presents the information to the audience in a candid way and allows them to consider whether they would make the same choices that the filmmaker did. The content and the stylistic decisions in portraying this content allow the audience to pry into the personal experiences of the filmmaker, whilst provoking a reflection on their own experiences with COVID, family, and honesty.